Let me ask the panel to focus on a very specific issue, which is the question of monopoly, okay? And let's set aside for a second the licensed monopoly that people get when their intellectual property is protected by a patent or a trademark, okay? Let's just set that aside. We're not talking about that particularly approved monopoly. We're talking about other kinds. Does everybody agree that we have seen circumstances recently in which a drug manufacturer has an effective monopoly with respect to one or more of their products? Does anybody dispute that phenomenon? Everybody agrees with that phenomenon? We've seen it, right? That's not complicated. Yes, everybody agrees. So let's say that you are a patient and you have taken a particular drug for many, many years and it's not under any kind of trademark or patent protection, but somebody who's not even in the pharmaceutical industry, an investor, comes in and sees a monopoly, buys it, and jacks the price up by 500%. Just because they can. We know that that has happened also, don't we? Yes, from everybody. No dissent with that. Okay. So here's the problem that I have, which is that in that circumstance, the question then is, where do you go? How do people respond to that particular problem? And the thesis that I have is that in those circumstances, which we all admit are true, that there is a clear monopoly, and further, we see price manipulation consistent, not with any market, but with monopoly power. My thesis is that there's no place for anybody to go. There is no entity in the United States government that has the authority to say, hold it, that's a monopoly. You are extracting monopoly rents, to use the economic term, and you got to knock it off. You may be able to get a lawsuit out of the Department of Justice for an antitrust or price-fixing type violation, but we haven't seen a lot of that. The FDA nibbles around the edges of this problem. It doesn't have authority to step in at that point. Shouldn't there be some place in government where it is clear once a monopoly exists, and there's no doubt about that, and it's clear that monopoly rent extraction is being done, nothing related to market pricing, in that narrow circumstance, shouldn't there be somebody able to act? And let's go right down the line here, starting with Mr. Menigan.
Thank you, Senator. We share your frustration. We often serve as uncompensated insurance agents for those with coverage who have to navigate complex insurance regs and coverage issues and co-payments and insurance. We want desperately to be part of the team that helps people navigate this system in a more effective way. And you concur that right now there's no place to go. That we have relatively few places, other than perhaps compassionate use programs that some companies provide, but not all companies provide that.
Mr. Merritt.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It is part of the marketplace. What we've seen is part
of a legitimate marketplace, though, right? Extracting monopoly rents isn't viewed by any economist as being legitimate economic behavior, is it?
Well, we didn't like it when Mr. Shkreli went and bought up Daraprim and sold it for thousands of percent more. And I testified the same panel as him a year or two ago.
But other than scolding him here in congressional committees,
well, here's what we did.
Nobody to say, no, you can't do that.
I'll tell you one thing that we did, and I'll let Lori talk about the legality, but just something we did in the marketplace. When Daraprim, the price was jacked up, he bought the drug for, was it $13.50 or something like that, and jacked it up to several $100s. If you looked at that from a price control perspective, maybe it'd be great if he just cut that in half to a few $100s. Or if you looked at, well, maybe he shouldn't charge more than it was originally, $13. What we did is we found a compound pharmacy out in San Diego that would do for $1. And then we cut his drug off the formulary and said, here, everybody can have this drug for $1, but you can't have the Daraprim that's overpriced. So there are some things we can do in the marketplace, but that's not to say or imply that it's not a challenge. It just takes time to overcome.
My time is already out, so if I could just, if you have quick responses, I'll go to Mrs. Gallinaug, and then.
Sure, thank you, Senator. As you know, HDA members are unique in the supply chain, but we do support anything that supports increased competition in the marketplace.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah, Senator, I think what you've been characterizing is the equivalent of a de facto monopoly,
Yeah.
right? Not one that's government licensed, but de facto, and it requires a lot of analysis before individuals like Mr. Shkreli decide to go in there. I do think moving forward there is a need to continue focus here. I do think that some of the things that the new FDA commissioner in the announcement of his Drug Competition Action Plan in legislation that this committee ensured was part of FDARA, which was a listing of Daraprim-like drugs. So there's more visibility and increasing the, in an effort to try and minimize the risk associated with more of those types of circumstances.
You agree with
to
me that
provide
nobody presently has regulatory authority over
No.
exorbitant monopoly prices?
Correct.
charged?
To the credit of the FDA commissioner, I think he's doing what he can
trying
within
with
his
what he-
remit.
exactly, but
But
there is
does he
no-
have all the authority to address that in and of himself? No.
Last of Ms. Riley.
I would say companies, like in the instance of Daraprim, took advantage of regulatory arbitrage to dramatically increase the price. I do think there is a lot that the
Because
FDA
there
can do.
was no direct regulator on the beat whose responsibility was to look for a clear de facto monopoly and address the excess price extraction.
Right. And to Chip's point, I think
I'm
there's
sorry,
been a
is that
lot
right?
more.
I just want to make sure I heard you. Your answer.
Yeah,
You said right.
I would say in that particular case, and we've seen a handful of others
Yep.
that mimic the same pattern, is exactly right. I think the FDA is trying to do, but more could be done, and we've got lots of ideas on how you could address that.
Thanks for letting me go over it, Chairman Franken.